Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fazana Ninar and today I will presentation about my thesis proposal with the title The Effectiveness of Using Scrabble Games in Improving Students' Vocabulary Mastery at the 10th grade students of SMKN Kecotangan. This is about table of content. Chapter 1 is about introduction. Introduction consists of background of the research, statement of the problem, objective of the research, significance of the research, scope, and limitation. In chapter 2 is about review of related literature, is about theoretical framework, review study, hypothesis of the research. The last is chapter 3. It consists about research design, population and sample, variable of research, technique of collecting data, and the last is analyzing data. Background of the research. In learning English, students must be required to master all language skills, such as listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In learning writing, students must be able to master about the language elements of writing. One of them is vocabulary. When students improving their vocabulary mastery, they need something or tool that can increase their knowledge about vocabulary. So, one of way is students can use a word scramble game to improving their vocabulary mastery. Why I choose this title? Because I think when students learning vocabulary, they still have a difficulty. So in this thesis proposal, I choose word scramble game to be a media that can help students in improving their vocabulary mastery. The next is about statement of the problem. Based on the background of the research, the formulation of the problem in thesis are: the first is how far the effectiveness of using word scramble games in improving children's vocabulary mastery at SMKN 1 Rejotangan. And the second is, can word scramble games be implemented as a way to improve vocabulary in the learning process at SMKN 1 Rejotangan? Next is about objective of the research. According to formulation, the objective of the study are: the first is to find out the effectiveness of using word scramble games in improving students' vocabulary mastery at SMKN 1 Rejotangan. And the second is to find out the implementation of word scramble games as a way to improve vocabulary in learning process at SMKN 1 Rejotangan. Next is about significance of the research. I write this research study to give theoretical benefit and practical benefit. For the first is theoretical benefit. In this thesis proposal is expected to improve the students' vocabulary mastery using word scramble games at the 10th grade students of SMKN 1 Rejotangan. And the second, the findings of the research are expected to give important significance for: the first is English teacher. The result of this study can help the English teacher to apply in learning process easily. Next, for students. Students are expected to improve their vocabulary mastery by using word scramble game. And the last is for other researchers. It can be a helpful reference for next researcher who want to do another research with same topic. The last is about scope and limitation. The content of this research will be focused on finding the effectiveness and the implementation of word scramble games in improving students' vocabulary mastery. In conducting this research, the participant is limited to the 10th grade students of SMKN 1 Rejotangan. The last is about review of related literature in chapter 2. In this chapter, it consists of theoretical framework and previous study. In the theoretical framework, The researcher will focus on some information related to the two case area of word scramble games and vocabulary. The previous study explained the research which has been conducted by other researchers previously as the reference to this research. The first is about game. Rickards and Smith said that game is an organized activity that has several properties, such as a particular text or objective, a set of rules, competition, and the communication between players. In this framework, I give some information about the definition of game, types of games, and about the advantage and disadvantage of games. Next is about Scrabble game. Mukhoyaro said that Scrabble is for the type of game with brain development and improvement of vocabulary thinking insight. This game is basically an exercise in developing and improving insight about the vocabulary and ownership of letter available. The principle of this game skill that players are expected to be strong, and the language structure is deliberately confused before it is done. I will give some information about the types of scramble games, the procedure of using scramble games, and about advantage and disadvantage of using scramble games. Next, about vocabulary. Asia said that vocabulary is regarded as one of essential factors that give big influence to the people's communication. Vocabulary is essential for successful second language use because without an extensive vocabulary, we will be unable to use the structures and functions we may have learned for comprehensible communication. It consists about kinds of vocabulary, the ways to remember vocabulary, and the last is previous study. This is previous study from other researchers. In making this thesis proposal, I was considering the previous research from other researchers to support my thesis proposal. They are the title is The Effectiveness of Using Scrabble Games to Teach Vocabulary Mastery on Simple Past Tense on the 8th grade students at SMPN 1 Banyu Biru. The author is Hidayatul, and she used quantitative approach and she used experimental method. In collecting data, she used documentation and tests. It's about pre-test and post-test. And the result is Scrabble games in effective in improving students' vocabulary, and it can be applied in teaching vocabulary. And the second, the previous study from Muhammad Fahriza with the title The Effect of Scrabble Games on the 7 Students' Vocabulary Mastery at SMP PAT 19 Manunggal. He used quantitative approach and he used pre-experimental method. When collecting data, he used tests about pre-test and post-test, and the result of the study is the using of Scrabble games on 7th grade students caused a positive effect to the students' achievement in English vocabulary mastery. Hypothesis of the research. Hypothesis is a statement of the research assumption about the relationship between two variables that the researcher plans to test within the framework of the research study. Based on the explanation, I conducted hypotheses as follows. Alternative hypothesis H1. Word Scrabble game is effective and can be implemented to improving children's vocabulary mastery. Next is chapter 3 about research methodology. In this chapter, I discuss about research methodology. It includes about the research design, population and sample, This variable, technique of collecting data, and technique of analyzing the data. I use quantitative approach in this thesis proposal. Quantitative approach is an emphasis on collecting and analyzing information in the form of number and comparing groups or relating factors about individuals and organizations. In obtaining the data and information, I use pre-experimental design. Pre-experimental design is a research design that has not been classified as a real experiment and only includes a group or a group of experiments that have been tested before and after. Population and sample. Population is a group of individuals with the qualities are known as variables. In this thesis proposal, I take the population consists of all students at 10th grade of SMK and Wadajotangan in the academic year 2020 and 2021. There are 10 classes and each other consists of 32 students. Sample. Sample is partially or as representative of the population to be studied. In this thesis proposal, I use sample from class C that consists of 32 students. And in this thesis proposal, I use sample technique named simple random sampling. Simple random sampling is a type of probability sampling in which the researcher randomly selects as a subset of participants from a population. Each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Next, about research variable. Variables in the object of research or what is the attention of the research point. Variable can be divided into several types according to certain characteristics. And in this research study, I used two variables. For the first is about independent variable. Independent variable is the variable that does or change the dependent variable. The independent variable in this thesis proposal is bootstrap kit. And next about dependent variable. Dependent variable that is influenced are known as a variable result of the independent variable. The dependent variable in this thesis proposal is students' vocabulary mastery. Next about collecting of technique of collecting the data. I use questionnaire and test. Questionnaire research is a way of collecting data using a set of questionnaires consisting of questions or statements that given to respondents. The purpose of the study is to obtain more information about the subject. And I use tests. It consists of pre-test and post-test. Pre-test is a test that must be completed by students, or it can be a question that is asked at the beginning of a learning activity. The purpose of the pre-test is to determine the level of understanding of the initial ability of students to the subject to be studied. Post-test. Post-test is a test that must be completed by students in the form of questions that must be answered by students after the learning process is complete. The next test aims to determine whether the learning process is successful and to determine the student's absorption of learning material. The last is about technique of analyzing the data. I use, in this research study, I use validity. This is content validity. Content validity is focused on providing evidence of the element that exists in measuring instrument and processed by rational analysis. Content validity rated by experts. When measuring tools describe in detail, the assessment will be easier. And for the reliability. For the reliability, I use SPSS. SPSS is statistic software package used for interactive or page statistical analysis. In other hand, it used for the analysis of statistical data. Okay, that's all from my presentation. Thank you for your nice attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Ini ya Mbak Cid. Aduh, ya Allah,